Let's paint a golden key today. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new, my name is Agla and I'm a watercolor artist. This week we're gonna paint quite something different. Usually I paint botanical subject, but recently I started to want to introduce something different, not just for all my students or viewers, but also for myself. And I would like to challenge myself and try different things. So when I saw this golden key, I couldn't wait to paint it because those shiny metallic objects are just something that every artist kind of want to challenge themselves with, whether it's pencils or oil paints or watercolor. So let's just dive straight in and mix the colors. So we have plenty of warm, nice yellows, and for my lightest cool yellow I chose lemon yellow. I added a tiny bit of quinacridone gold just to warm it up a little bit, and for my warm yellow I chose quinacridone gold on its own. Now what we need is this very dark gray, but in order for it not to be too disconnected from other colors, I mixed neutral tint with quinacridone gold, and so I have this very nice grayish brown dark gold color. I also gonna need just a tiny bit of quite neutral gray, so I mix neutral tint with a bit of blue to take the edge of that purple for a few highlighted areas that seem to be like gray rather than white. So that's what we can start with. Before I apply our foundation layers, I want to mark in those few highlights that I just mentioned with that very pale gray color. Because I only have a couple of areas where I need to paint in right now, I don't wet my paper before. I paint with wet paint on dry paper and just soften the edges with clean down brush. Right, so now we can start our foundation layer with our yellow. So because the object is quite small and very small shapes, we don't really need wet on wet, so I'll just go ahead, start painting right away with watery transparent watercolors right on dry paper. So our foundation layer is this our lighter yellow, and I block all of the key with that color except a few those bits that we painted with gray color. So those are our highlights. Right, so now we have our first layer. We can remove a little bit of pencil because yellow color usually makes pencil mark permanent, and so I want to remove something that I no longer gonna need around those highlighted areas. Right, so now I'm gonna choose second brush for softening our glazes, because if you use only one brush then you need to constantly clean it, reload with color, clean it, reload the color. So having two brushes, one for painting, the other one for softening the little glazes and edges that I'm gonna show you in a minute, is just gonna be way quicker and less nerve-wracking. So what I'm gonna do now, before I apply our main warm yellow color, I want to paint in some of those dark shadows. And so you can see me now painting with that dark gray golden color, and after I apply a little bit of color on one little area, I soften the edges of every single sort of glaze with clean down brush, the second clean down brush. And that way we can be quite detailed and examine every single centimeter of that key. And you can see I'm taking my time and painting just little sections at a time, trying to be quite detailed. So I'm not paying attention much to the dark yellow color. I'm only painting in those very dark gray, nearly black shadows. And the reason I'm painting them right now, because usually you paint from lighter colors to darker, but in this instance I'm painting very lightest color, then darkest, and then I'm gonna cover with mid-tone, as you can see now. And the reason is because once I apply that dark gray shadow, applying a mid-tone on top of it sort of softens the shadow color and makes it less rigid. So sort of you sandwich the shadow in between two layers of yellow, and that hopefully helps to be less sharp. And you know, because sometimes when you paint shadows right on top of the layer, they can come out a little bit too rigid. So what you see me do now is painting over those shadows with this warm, darker yellow. I'm using very small brush strokes so that I can stay quite detailed, because if you look closely you can see that in some areas the color needs to be a bit stronger, and in some areas it needs to fade away into the yellow, into the light yellow, and have sort of disappearing edge, because the key is golden, it's metallic and it has lots of shine, but it all has to kind of blend and disappear nicely because it has all these nice curves, and as the light hits, you know, those curves have sharp shadows, and all of a sudden they disappear into the highlight. After I applied dark golden yellow color, I go back to my other colors, my shadow dark color, and just strengthening the areas that kind of got lost a little bit, or after the colors dried seems too light. So after I sharpen, just touch up, and once I've done that, I see that my light yellow sort of faded away a little bit and it needs a little bit oomph and brightness, and just went back in with my very light yellow and glazed very gently over to just make that key truly golden. And if you would like to follow along and paint with me, a full step-by-step tutorial of this golden key is on my Patreon, and I will put the link down in the description box. And so now that is the steps, and that's the process I will take to paint the rest of the key. So now that the golden key is painted, what we need to do is paint that very nice gentle pink string and cast shadows. So for that I'm gonna need a very neutral gray. So I'm using neutral tint, which is a little bit too purple for me. So I'm adding tiny bit of phthalo blue, and it neutralizes it and makes it a little bit more basic neutral gray. I'm also gonna need a little bit of pink. So for that I'm using permanent rose, and I really watered it down, and we're gonna use very watery and transparent watercolors. So the first step, I'm gonna go and block in those few gray parts that shines through the pink, and I'm gonna paint only the string part and the ribbon part, and not the cast shadows right now. So just go ahead and paint the shadow parts in the string. I'm using the same method, painting with very transparent watery colors on dry paper and softening the edges, making them disappear into the highlighted areas with clean, damp brush. Now we can go ahead and paint in the pink color of our string. So make sure to use very watery and very transparent color, because you can see how gentle and light the color is. So we want to make sure we build the colors with very, very transparent mixes. So now that the ribbon part is done, what we need to is paint in the cast shadow. So that might be a little bit more tricky. So we need to closely examine the cast shadow. So first thing, the rule is to use very watery transparent color and better build the color in few layers rather than going too strong, because the cast shadows usually can make or break the painting. So if you chose to paint it, then make sure you go very gradually and start painting with very light colors and then strengthening it very gradually, because if they come out too strong, they sort of ruins the painting. So again, the same method, very watery transparent color, little glaze, and softening with clean down brush. And if you notice, I leave tiny bit of light right next to the key, so I'm leaving sort of a string of light between the shadow and the key. After applying first layers of cast shadow, I just want to go and strengthen the color a little bit, and I'll do that with dry brush. So I'm choosing very small brush, very pale dry paint, and I'm just gonna go over with crosshatch technique, almost as if I would be drawing with pencils. Last few brush strokes and our painting is done. So full step-by-step tutorial of this golden key is on my Patreon. You can find the link in the description box, and I hope that you enjoyed this video and you will subscribe and hit that thumbs up. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.